people are theorizing that the Septuagint came first and the Hebrews came, regardless if that's true or not. Even if it's not true, there could be on the other side, there could be that this Old Testament myth fits so well with what Plato envisioned that the people in Alexandria said, let's put this together as this Septuagint. That's Ptolemaic Empire, that is Greek, obviously, and they have the libraries and they have Plato's writings. Are they putting together what becomes the myth of the Western civilization as we know it, Judeo-Christianity? That's the question, I think. Is Plato the one who constructs this?
I don't know if you realize the profundity and terror implicit in the question that you just framed. I mean, it is perhaps the single most disturbing question that we could grapple with about the history of Western civilization and, by extension, the entire world that's been conquered and dominated by the West.
And hold on, let me just stop for a second. Yeah. All the hours of us talking as leading up to this question right here, it literally has been. And this is like the question. Did Plato construct what became the myth of the West, the religion of the Western civilization as we know it? The universal church.
So, okay, I answered this question, not in the Pharmacon Artist, although, I'm developing an embryonic phase of it there. I'm planting the seeds for it there. But I answer this question of yours at the heart of Iranian Leviathan. In the series of chapters that goes from the one I mentioned earlier, Emperor of Noble Lies, where I'm portraying Darius the Great as a noble liar in the style of the Platonic philosopher king, all the way through Hassan Sabah, the leader of the Order of Assassins at Alamut Fortress, claiming that nothing is true and everything is permitted, and that the entire Quran, with its sunnat, its Sharia law, was a noble lie. Okay? In the series of chapters in Iranian Leviathan, which includes a treatment of the origin of the Old Testament under the influence of Mithraists, who were the patrons of Jewish Pharisees that set up the Second Temple state after Cyrus and Darius rebuilt the Temple of Solomon. Okay, I have a whole treatment of that. That chapter is comically titled Tekel Tekel Mene Shekel. And it's about the relationship between the Persians and the Jews and how Judaism was created and why.
And you also have so many commonalities between the Mithraic orders and the early Christians. So much. They're even using the same worship places.
Right. So now, look, this is like a whole other conversation.
This could be, yeah.
Okay. But in a nutshell, the answer to your question is that a case can be made that people who understood very well what Plato's esoteric project was, and people who knew how to deploy, nobilize in the most sophisticated way on the highest level or at the deepest level, if you want to put it that way, engineered the Abrahamic revelation, the biblical religion, as a catalyst for the transformation of society. But the catalyst was not intended to get people to become good Jews or later good Christians or even later good Muslims. The catalyst was intended to get people to go to the devil. The purpose of the catalyst was to confront people with an image of divinity that ought to be rejected and resisted by the conscience of the human individual.
Whoa.
It was a pharmacon. Remember, pharmacon. It's poison. If you don't take to it the right way, it will kill you. It's a snake bite, like the snake in the garden. of Eden. Why would you tell a story like that, by the way? If your point is to get people to believe in Yahweh, why do you even have the whole narrative of the serpent offering the fruit of the tree of knowledge to Adamic man? Why? Why even include the story about the fallen angels and how they taught humanity to rebel against the Elohim? Why even have the Tower of Babel in there? I mean, if you just want to instill paternalistic, patriarchal, collectivistic obedience into a society, write like Confucius. Don't tell us about this serpent and about these rebel angels and about this Tower of Babel. What are you trying to do here? Instigate rebellion. Give people models of challenging authority. That's very Plato. So, okay, so here's the thing. My view is very radically divergent from the common understanding of the relationship between both Christian scholasticism and Plato, and then later Islamic scholasticism and Plato, because Plato was as important to the medieval Muslim thinkers as he was to the Catholic scholastics. Conventionally, it's believed, and even Nietzsche subscribed to this idea, that Christianity is Platonism for the masses, right, and that the Christian scholastics, Aquinas, before him Augustine, and so on and so forth, they basically adapted elements of Plato into aspects of the Christian faith by making them more amenable to a popular understanding, right?
But what you just did is you just answered the question that scholars have been dumbfounded by, is the closer we get to the origins of Christianity, the closer we get to the beginning, the more diverse it is, the more Gnostics there are, the more opposing there are. There's people who literally say that Yahweh is evil and that Cain was good because he wasn't offering blood sacrifices. They start off that way. They don't become that way later on. They start off that way because you're seeing the duality within the stories. You choose a side. You're choosing a side.
And so I believe it's a travesty.
You're right, dude.
For the Christian scholastics to frame Plato as, quote, a virtuous pagan, unquote. Like, he would have been a Christian if he were alive today. No. Plato is out to create the devil. That's his aim. Plato wants to basically promulgate diabolane, what the Greeks called diabolane, a dynamic tension, a throwing through of opposites. This is what his dialectical method is about. It's why his dialogue, it's why he wrote dialogues, and it's why his writings are structured in the conversational and oppositional way that they are, because he wants people to set positions against one another. He assumes all kinds of positions through the mouth of Socrates that he himself doesn't subscribe to, and that over the course of his corpus contradict each other. And he does that for the sake of provoking insight and catalyzing independent thinking.
He's literally separating goats from sheep in a sense, where
exactly.
Here's the story. However you interpret this will determine if you're one of these types.
That's exactly it. And in fact,
it's genius. It really is.
In fact, he comes close to saying this, in the seventh letter, that you can't get philosophy from some treatise. That it's not like, philosophy is not about subscribing to a worldview that some guy has written down in a treatise. You have to have direct experiential knowledge of certain things about the nature of reality. And you're only going to get that in dialogue and in a life in common, he says, with others also devoted to seeking the truth. So Plato has this unwritten doctrine. And this unwritten doctrine deploys all kinds of noble lies, up to and including, I believe, the theory of forms. And to my mind, Plato doesn't subscribe to the objective existence of these forms. They're useful constructs to promote the rise of rational thought of the kind that eventually becomes scientific analysis.